What's up, guys, and welcome back to the PricePlow vlog. Feels so good to say that again. We're down here in the wonderful St. Petersburg, a little south of Tampa, at the Issn conference for 2021. We're gonna be learning about all sorts of things, tons of different topics, lots of research being presented. I even hear there's some new data about New Level being presented this weekend. Nutrition 21 was kind enough to fly me down. They didn't sponsor this video or anything, but I wanted to give them a shout out, and I'm super excited to be down here learning about all of the information that's gonna be important for the next year in sports nutrition. I'm not gonna be recording any seminars or boring you guys, but I'm trying to give you a fun look at the other side of the industry. One thing that I'm super proud about with PricePlow is that we actually stay on top of the research. We don't just go to the Olympia and the Arnold and talk to pro bodybuilders. We also take you for a first exclusive look at the newest research and data in sports nutrition. So strap in and enjoy the ride. So what is the ISSN? Well, taking it straight from their site, the International Society of Sports Nutrition is the only nonprofit academic society dedicated to promoting the science and application of evidence-based sports nutrition and supplementation. The ISSN is the world's leader in providing science-based sports nutrition and supplementation information. Their peer-reviewed journal, JISSN, you may have seen cited on our site sometimes. Conferences and attendees are the key influencers and thought leaders in the sports nutrition and supplement field. So obviously, an important place to be. Super excited to be around these kinds of people and soaking in this kind of information. I don't think I've been this excited to learn since college. I mean, last time I've learned this much was probably Supply Side West 2019. Since then, we've been locked inside and reading a lot. So what happens at a conference like this? Well, I don't know if you can see on my phone, but we've got a long schedule of seminars and lectures, maybe, on anything from, let's say, nutrient timing and macros, to diet refeeds, diet breaks, immunological approach to reducing URTI symptoms in high intensity training, acute effects of energy drinks on metabolism, autonomic responses, and excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, even carbohydrate recommendations for training. A lot of really cool stuff that obviously has a lot of crossover into the information that we share. So this weekend, between the conferences, between dinners with researchers and consultants in the industry, I wanted to see if I could maybe provide a look into behind the scenes exclusively where you would never see this information on any other channel. So if anything of this interests you, you're probably in for a treat. All right, all registered and ready to rock.
I'm very pleased for everybody to able to meet in person and get back to hearing about all the wonderful aspects of sport nutrition here. So we've got a series of talks lined up for this afternoon. Our first speaker is Eric Castillo.
And oftentimes we think that supplements are not regulated, when in reality, supplements are regulated. They're not watched under a microscope the way that many drugs are. The FDA isn't like looking at every single company all the time.
So when we talk about nutrient timing, often there can be kind of a emphasis or extreme focus on the macronutrients. And that's largely because it's been researched the longest. Most evidence is present for macronutrients, but we do have kind of emerging bodies of research in supplements. And so this particular talk, we're going to cover some of those supplements.
So halfway through day one, we had a packed morning, learned about things, some really interesting kind of stuff. Standardizations and body composition assessments, effects of NSAIDs like prescription anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, stuff like that on hypertrophy and bone, which was actually a really interesting study done by the US Army. High intensity interval training with amino acid supplementation, which was marginally interesting outside of the limitations of the data. They used 3.2 grams of EAAs, which would be the dose literally I'd want for just the leucine out of the EAAs, on an old obese crowd. So it wasn't super relevant, but interesting, nice that they're doing something. Just went over acute effects of energy drink formulas on metabolism and excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, which was definitely probably funded by Bang, but definitely an interesting study on energy drinks as opposed to just regular caffeine. So for the afternoon, we've got some stuff that, unfortunately Mike isn't here for the keto study, but workload and neurological performances in D1 athletes is kind of interesting. There's been a big emphasis on D1 athletes, like actual collegiate athletes, and not just body composition or bodybuilding, which is kind of fun because a lot of the times we deal with just fitness, physique enthusiasts and not really actual athletes. And as an athlete myself, it's kind of fun to see actual performance benefits talked about. And then we're also going to be learning about rapid fat loss and how fast is too fast, which I think is definitely a good question to talk about. So you can get these PowerPoints for these online if you want to learn more. I'm not going to record the full seminar to give it to you guys. I consider most of our viewers to be people who would be interested in this. I definitely recommend you try it out at some point. All right, so I figured I'd come over before the big presentation happens, but Nutrition 21 is showing this Texas A&M data on effects of arginine silicate and inositol ingestion on cognitive and executive function in gamers, which obviously is new level. So what they did was they had gamers do a similar study as previously, but this time they're actually testing for reaction time, and they have actually managed a pretty decent claim on reaction time, talking about like a 25 microsecond difference, which if you're familiar with video games, for instance, time to kill in like a Call of Duty Warzone can be around 200 microseconds, so 25 microseconds is a pretty significant amount of time. So new claim for new level, we'll be doing some content on it soon, presented here at the ISSN conference. So what's the significance? Well, new level didn't have reaction time before. They had cognitive flexibility, they had decision-making skills, but now they have reaction time, which is a huge deal for any sort of fast-paced video gaming. I think it'll be a big deal for them.
Or realistic weight loss would look like in a fit population. And it's nothing like this. One thing, if you look at the very small amount of literature in lean people who lose body fat or who attempt to diet,
halfway through all of the talks, seminars, whatever you want to call them, lectures, research, presentations, and I'm realizing this vlog might get a little bit, there's not a lot going on with interaction. We're going to finish the day out. I've got a couple more to attend. I'm actually going to be going to Planet Fitness with Mark Lobliner.
Ben over there from PricePlow. PricePlow. Yes.
When I get back, I'm going to do a full kind of synopsis of what I learned this weekend, what I enjoyed about this, like who might enjoy this kind of trip, maybe kind of shift the video towards that way. Because I'm realizing if I really took you guys along for most of this, you'd be sitting in the seminar with me, and that's not really fair to record the presentation for them because the ISSN, you know, asks people to pay to come see this. And other than that, it's just been getting dinners with Nutrition 21, different owners and stuff like that. And those dinners are best spent off camera. It's been an awesome weekend so far. I've learned so much. I've gotten to interface with so many cool people that I appreciate the thought processes behind and the, you know, genius behind so many of them. Like Dr. Hector Lopez, Rob Wildman, Layton Norton gets to talk at One Thing. So many smart people. I'm forgetting, blanking right now because I'm thinking about so much. And when I get home, we'll talk all about everything that went on this weekend, everything that I learned, all the interesting data, what I'm excited to learn more about with the rest of the data to come from future studies from some of these that are going to actually be ongoing.
So I've come to the conclusion, just a rotten piece of fruit. So I'll end up dying slow. See, I just want to be able to climb without a fall. To get out of this maze, please try.
The importance of the actual protein delivery matrix, because we have a lot of ways to deliver protein, whether food, whey protein, etc. And then talk about whole body protein turnover, then tie the line and go eat.
All right, well, we're back back in Jersey. I really took some time to think about the trip, the things that I learned, the people that I interacted with. And I think that the video and the way that it took its course was a fun analogy for my expectations and how I felt about the ISSN conference as a whole. I expected the vlog to be similar to my Supply Side West vlog, my Glaxon vlog, where you got to see my full day beginning to end. Just like I expected the actual expo, which ended up not being the right word for any of it, to be meeting, stopping at booths, saying hello to people, interacting a ton, and getting to videotape all of it. And what it really was such a close-knit community of researchers and professionals in the industry insiders that were sharing information, learning from each other, and really just one of the most positive communities I've ever experienced in fitness. Unfortunately, because of the close ties that supplementation has to bodybuilding and the dieting community as a whole, so often we deal with such negativity and such bad people. And this community of the ISSN could not be further from that. It was such a beautiful, awesome weekend, such a great experience to be around such great people. And I really shouldn't be surprised because I knew a lot of the people there. Most of them are from Nutrition 21 or the neighboring circles and communities around that group. And every time I ever get to spend time with anyone in that group, whether it is the Nutrition 21 people or it's the people slightly outside of it, like Hector Lopez, Rick Collins, Rob Wildman, I mentioned all those people before, but that group of people, they're so close together and so just profoundly brilliant, kind, and eager to share information. It's always a great time, and I really probably should have expected this, but I kind of wanted to go back through and talk a little bit about some of the things that I learned the most. I mean, they gave us this awesome conference and expo guide, but sitting through these conferences, I did take some notes and I did keep in some of it, and I don't know if I can really sit down and give you guys such a comprehensive this happened at this hour and whatever, but I took away so many cool things that I'm probably gonna compartmentalize and utilize so much in our videos and Q&As and stuff like that. But some of the biggest things I wanted to bring home: nutrient timing, Patrick Hardy, more than just macros. You saw that a little bit in the video. That one actually took such a really cool turn into talking about caffeine, and they did a really interesting caffeine timing study, when to take it, when the peak should be, and different types of training, taking when the peaks of caffeine should be. It's probably no surprise that the peak of caffeine for strength trainers, which is what I really was focused for myself, should be at the time of the biggest lift, so your top set. But what was so cool about it was they used 6 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine for the study. And so all you people that doubted me about high doses of caffeine were proved wrong, because a 100 kilogram person, a 220 pound athlete, was using 600 milligrams of caffeine in that study. Think about bigger people. A lot of people were bigger than 220. So that was totally safe, totally awesome. They found tons of benefits from that. Some other stuff: diet refeeds and diet breaks. Such an interesting amount of information showing that folks who dieted 7 days at a caloric deficit versus people who dieted 5 days at a deficit, then 2 days at maintenance, actually lost the same amount of weight, but the people who did the refeeds every weekend were actually losing more fat and maintaining more muscle. So net the same weight, but actually better composition. So that was super cool. I do think it'd be interesting to actually extend that maintenance to a whole week and make the diet longer, because I do think that because of the amount of time it takes to reestablish and fix ghrelin and leptin, it might have been better if it was even a little bit longer, but more data obviously to come on that. Eric Bustillo, who you saw a little bit of his video, the registered dietitian's top pieces of advice for RDs and sports nutritionists, was the awesome, it's the perfect way to kick off the weekend, because it wasn't one specific type of research or anything, but it talked a lot about just applying common sense and some anecdata, taking everything with a grain of salt. It was really the greatest start to the weekend, because the ISSN has very specific standpoints on a lot of different things. They do hate on fat burners, which I don't really always agree with, but they take everything with a certain healthy amount of skepticism, which I really do love about them. The second day, we went to body composition assessment. Lack of standardization can wreak havoc. It was kind of obvious, if you aren't weighing yourself on the same scale at the same time with the same conditions every day, you're going to have all sorts of problems because of the lack of standardization. That's a little bit obvious. But what was not obvious: Brandon Roberts' effective NSAIDs on muscle and bone from cells of soldiers. This was a whole study from the Army I talked a little bit about, and it basically meant NSAIDs as a whole completely fuck up the way that you recover and can totally ruin hypertrophy for you. Celecoxib was the worst. Like, it absolutely destroyed all chances of hypertrophy. NSAIDs basically blocked the COX enzyme, which is stimulated by arachidonic acid, which I found kind of an interesting. I know that arachidonic acid is helpful, but I haven't looked into it much. But things like ibuprofen, naproxen, acetaminophen, really stay away from them if you can. Like, if you can handle the pain, stay away from them. Obviously, if you are injured, it's probably important to actually be using them. Now, one really, really important an interesting one was the energy status of collegiate athletes, what they don't know might be hurting them. It was all about relative energy deficiency and the difference between what athletes are actually eating versus what they need to be feeding themselves with, which was huge. I have some data here. It was 52% of female D1 track athletes were found to be low energy. 45% of Division I distance runners were low energy. They're not eating enough. They're not fueling their bodies. I mean, obviously, this has a lot to do with, the ideal body shape and the way that there was a lot of women in this study. The way that women are depicted in social media and pop culture and stuff, and they think they need to look a certain way. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a shot put thrower, you're not going to look like a bikini athlete. It's totally fine. One thing that I would have to say is they didn't really look at like contact sports where people are heavier, sports where people do eat a lot. They looked a lot like distance runners and stuff like that. I would have probably diversified that a little bit, but obviously that did support, and it probably is a little bit closer to the people that they were trying to look at. High intensity interval training with essential amino acid supplementation, Katie Hirsch. This one was one I was really looking forward to because obviously you guys know I love EAAs. Problem was, I think it was 3.2 grams of EAAs twice a day. That's not even enough leucine within that to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So obviously there was little to no improvement found. I think they said that they noticed a lower rate of perceived exertion, but that could just be like placebo. So that was disappointing. There was a keto study published, basically found what we all kind of had, like, no. Ketosis, the keto study really helps out if you can adhere to it. It can help with some people who are specifically great with that kind of dieting. However, it's not going to do anything if you aren't able to stay in a caloric deficit. And for some people, it could actually be a problem because they are triggered by carbs and really should be using them in a balanced diet instead of completely pulling them out. This was a really interesting study, and for more than just carbohydrate recommendations for study, like, this really wasn't a great title for what I really pulled from it, in my opinion. They ran a study where they ran, I think it was like 25, 50, and 75 grams of carbs intra-workout. The first two categories saw improvements in performance, but the first one, the lowest group, saw actually the most per gram of carbohydrate boost in performance. The large group, 60 grams of carbs intra-workout, actually saw a reduction in performance. This wasn't like powerlifting or anything. This was something where like digestion would get in your way. So it was kind of theorized that digestion of a lot amount of carbohydrates was pulling blood to the stomach. It was, obviously poor performance. So instead, they switched to IV administration of carbohydrates, and they found no boost in performance, which is kind of interesting because we would obviously attribute carbohydrates to filling out glycogen stores and all that. But the fact of the matter really is that glycogen doesn't deplete fast enough for intra-workout carbs to really matter. Even when you're using like a very fast-acting cluster dextrin, it's really a cherry on top. The carbs need to be loaded way before for performance, really. So what they started doing was having the subject's mouth rinse wash with a carbohydrate supplement, spit it out, and then perform. And they saw a huge boost in performance from just washing their mouth with a carb supplement, spitting it out, and not swallowing any of it. They measured it going in, they measured it being spit out. It was the same amount. Obviously, a little bit maybe could be absorbed in the mouth, but a very, very, very small amount. And what was really interesting was even when they turned that into a non-calorie, just sweetened drink, they still saw the boost in performance. So it looks like having that sweet drink in your mouth is really boosting the performance because it's elevating your mood, etc. I found that wildly interesting, and I think that it's actually probably very applicable to a lot of different applications in sports supplements. We went into plant-based proteins. Obviously, this was a big deal for Planta from Lowbliner. Basically showed, and I like to kind of compare this to some previous studies which showed a little bit like downstream some of the effects of plant protein, but in the short term, plant proteins, if they are a blend of proteins, are just as effective than whey and other forms that are commonly found. It's a big deal because plants are becoming a big deal for protein. We see a lot of different natural plant proteins, non-dairy proteins, non-animal proteins, and it's great to see some studies backing that up. Michael Roberts did a whole study on the nuance of skeletal muscular hypertrophy, and I'll be honest with you, I still do not totally grasp my notes from that. It was a very in-depth topic about how muscles grow, and the fact of the matter is that we actually still really don't quite understand how it happens in a few different ways, which was totally very interesting for me as someone who accepts a lot of science as just, set and standard in the way it is. The cost of greatness, the fine line between fueling to win and disordered eating. I thought this was going to be interesting because I thought it was going to be similar to the relative energy deficiency study from the day before. So I actually didn't stick around for this one. I was pretty disappointed that was presented because I really wanted to talk about the benefits of eating to fuel, but the fact of the matter is that you need to be eating to fuel, and if your job is an athlete, you should be taking that seriously. So the whole disordered eating, I really can't sit through. However, Matthew Stratton afterwards did a intermittent fasting review of the literature, and it was actually very well done, especially because as the presentation went on, it became more and more clear that intermittent fasting has no actual benefits to fat loss or muscle gain outside of establishing a deficit. So when we got to the end of it, it was clear that, Matthew was really into intermittent fasting, and we were kind of like, how is he going to save this? At the end, he basically presented it the way that I would. It's a common tool that you could have in the toolbox, you could utilize. However, it's not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. Essentially amino acids and protein synthesis, insights into maximizing anabolism by David Church. This was a really interesting one. Again, very, very in-depth. I want to continue to go through my notes on this one and watch a little bit of video on it because there was some very interesting insight into the possibility of EAAs actually being more powerful for anabolism than actual food being in the acute. Long-term, we all know that there's a reason that beef gets you big quickly. There's a lot of other micronutrients involved. There's a lot of other things going on. However, in the acute, in terms of actual serum EAAs being ingested, possibly one of those powerful anabolic tools in the toolbox. This is where things got really heavy. The president's lecture, Tricia nominated Arnie Fernando to do a lecture on protein homeostasis in the stress state. And this was just wild. Arnie talked about some studies that they did on Marine spec ops groups in SEER camps where they would basically torture these guys and train them, and showed their hormonal states pre and post, and then 3 months post, and talked about the cortisol responses to these kind of stressful states, and then what happened to their anabolic resistance as a part of that. It took them months to absolutely recover in a hormonal state. It was absolutely incredible. And obviously we're not in such stressful states as what they were doing with that, but this was incredible. I mean, getting to learn about this and the way that they conducted these studies was just absolutely wild. We finished off with some betaine supplementation on fluid balance and thermoregulation. It was really important. It showed that betaine in the short term isn't as powerful as we might like it to be, but in the long term for fluid balance and thermoregulation, it really is great. The creatine and women study from Kayla Alessi. It was nice data. It was interesting to talk about. It was kind of interesting to see creatine production in the body mapped against progesterone and estrogen. But at the end of the day, I don't really think we need a lot more data on creatine with women. We know that creatine works in general. There's some interesting parallels, but nothing really new was presented. And lastly, there was a presentation from Jeff Stout, which was on the schedule, supposed to be about the sports supplement revolution through his lens of an eye, but it was actually a presentation of a Lifetime Achievement Award for Jose Antonio, who I had just met that weekend. I still don't know him very well, but getting to learn about the history of sports supplements, I actually got to learn about where creatine really was discovered as a supplement and how it was completely by accident found to be efficacious. And to follow Jose Antonio's career and Jeff Stout's career through sports supplements and how they got laughed out of other conferences for standing up for sports supplements and how they literally almost got fought at, I think, ACSM conferences for presenting data for sports supplements instead of just eating food was wild to me. In a day and age where companies make hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars off of sports supplements, it was wild to see that there was a certain point where these guys would be laughed at for even presenting creatine. So all in all, I have to thank so much Nutrition 21 for flying me down. This video was not sponsored. They didn't pay me to do this, but they did pay for a Frontier flight down to Tampa for the weekend, which was absolutely super helpful, super interesting. And this whole weekend was just a huge blessing to get to learn and meet and bump elbows with some of the most talented researchers in the industry, and just get to be like in their presence, which we cite their science all the time. I knew pretty much everyone's name there, but to get to see them as a person, to get to kind of just bend their ears and talk about the stuff that they had found and researched was just huge. I actually kind of plan on, I'm going to be studying for the ISSN SNS exam. I'd like to be able to put those letters behind my name. I'd be really proud to be part of everything they do. And hopefully I'll be making it back next year. They have some really cool stuff. Before then, we'll be doing Supply Side West. Very excited for that one. Take the research that we learned about and apply it into the industry. And hopefully we'll see some Olympia and Arnold after that. But for now, I'm really enjoying the other side of the industry. Even with these fitness expos going, I'm really enjoying the research. I'm enjoying the ingredient side. And I think that you guys seem to be as well. So comment below. Let me know. Did you like the video? Did you learn anything? Anyway, as always, guys, I really appreciate making this far in the video. And as always, have a great day.